Here across the far north, just not as windy as Wednesday. Brighter skies coming in across the south by the afternoon, and temperatures again mostly in mid to high single figures.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons? I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance.
Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's 6 o'clock, I'm Michelle Dewberry. This is Dewbs and Co, the show where we'll get into some of the things that have got you talking. Now, young men, are they being demonised? We've got sell-out courses such as how to tackle toxic masculinity. I mean, you know, if you know your bottom from your elbow as a young man these days, chance will be a fine thing. It must be very confusing being a young man. Are they, though, being unfairly demonised? And something that caught my eye this week was a teacher showcasing a placard that one of her students had made. It said on it, the only good Tory is a dead Tory. The only good Lib Dem is a dead Lib Dem. And I started thinking about the BBC over there. They have impartiality contracts where they have to be politically neutral. And I started to wonder, do you think public servants should have to be politically neutral when doing their job and when out in public? So, for example, should you be able to say you want dead Tories when you're on the picket line? Really? And a Welsh school has been put into special measures because, get this, too many of their pupils are speaking English and they're not having enough time to celebrate their Welshness. Interesting. How much effort do you think we should put into protecting regional languages and 15-minute cities? Some say fantastic, how convenient. Others say, hang on there a second. It's not about the 15-minute cities. It's about how restricted you're going to be within them and how easy it will be to travel outside of them. It's all about control, say some. Is it? Give me all your thoughts. But before we get into some of those things, let's bring ourselves up to speed with tonight's latest headlines brought to you by Polly Middlehurst.
Michelle, thank you, and good evening to you. The top story on GB News tonight. The Metropolitan Police Commissioner has apologised for failings in the force after the sentencing of former officer David Carrick today. The 48-year-old has been handed 36 life sentences and will serve a minimum term of 30 years for sexual offences against a dozen women. Carrick pleaded guilty to 49 charges, including 24 counts of rape, all carried out whilst he was a serving officer. Sir Mark Rowley says he's determined to root out misconduct in the force.
People are going to be very shaken by this. I completely recognise that. We are determined to tackle this. Most of our people are great people, but we've been too weak at getting rid of the ones who aren't. So you're going to see, month by month, changes as we remove those individuals, and you can report on that. I know my words today aren't enough. People have heard me talk about plans, and they're going to want to see the action that we take over forthcoming months, and they will see that.
Well, in other news today, Lancashire police say they still believe Nicola Bulley fell into the River Wyre while she was out walking her dog 11 days ago. The underwater search for the mother of two continues. The force is also investigating about 500 lines of inquiry, although so far has not found any evidence of criminality. Superintendent Sally Riley says they're not ruling anything out.
We remain fully open to any information that is credible and factual to try and trace Nicola and bring answers for her family. But it does remain our belief that Nicola sadly fell into the river and that this is a missing person inquiry.
Well, assisting the police, Specialist Group International's Peter Folding told GB News the case is unusual.
When Nicola went missing on the day, the police divers were deployed into the river here to search, and normally if somebody drowns they go straight to the bottom, and that's in my 20-odd years of experience of dealing with drowning victims, you know, done the hundreds of cases. Now, they go to the bottom, the river's slow moving, they won't go far, but the police divers, who are very professional, did not even find her then. And that's the weird thing.
The Foreign Secretary says 3 British nationals are missing following the earthquakes in Turkey and Syria. James Cleverly also told the House of Commons today 35 others have been identified as being caught up in the disaster, which has killed more than 5,000 people. Turkey's President Erdogan has declared a state of emergency for 3 months in the 10 cities most affected. And an aid worker for Islamic Relief, Salah Abu Ghassan, told GB News about his rescue efforts.
There are fuel shortages, so some of the cranes and some of the tractors that we need that are so vital in such a time in order to clear that rubble, unfortunately we've got fuel shortages. Consistently there are electrical shortages, there are communication towers that have been sort of cut off at times, so it's really desperate. We're trying to get as many people as possible evacuated.
Well, in news here at home, the Prime Minister's been busy revealing his new cabinet today following a reshuffle. He's also created 4 new departments. So Greg Hands takes over as the new Conservative Party chairman. That's after Nadeem Zahawi was sacked. Kemi Badenoch is the new Business and Trade Secretary. Lucy Fraser has become the Culture Secretary, taking over from Michelle Donnellan, who's been made a new Science and Technology Secretary. And the Business, Trade and Culture departments have been broken down into separate units, with Grant Shapps now Energy Security Secretary. Rishi Sunak says the changes will help everybody.
It means that we can reduce people's energy bills. That's so important. It means we can produce more energy here at home, giving us independence and security. And it means we can transition to cleaner forms of energy as we hit our net zero ambitions and create jobs in the process, as we're seeing here today. That's why today's changes are really important. We're focused on delivering for the British people, and this will help us do that.
Surrey Police have confirmed the deaths of Epsom College head teacher Emma Patterson and her daughter Letty are being treated as a murder investigation. Their two bodies were found along with Emma's husband George in the grounds of the school in the early hours of Sunday morning. The force had said George Patterson had recently been in contact with them about his shotgun licence in order to change his address to the site of the school. And lastly, the father of an obese teenager has been found guilty of manslaughter by gross negligence. 16-year-old Kayleigh Titford was found dead in the family home in Newtown in Wales in 2020. Kayleigh was found in conditions which were described as being unfit for any animal. Her mother was also found guilty of the same offence last year. You're up to date on TV, online and DAB+ radio. You're with GB News. Back now to Dewbs and Co.
Thanks for that, Polly. Well, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through till 7 o'clock tonight. And I've got alongside me Toby Young, the director of the Free Speech Union, and the political consultant, Emma Burnell. Good evening to both of you. I've just discovered, ladies and gents, that Toby Young does a fantastic Michelle Dewberry impression. I just discovered that. Do you want to share it with the nation, Toby?
Probably better not.
Oh, was that just a private preview for me? OK, take my word for it, it was quite impressive, actually. If I had to run to the loo or anything, I reckon Toby could stand in. And if you're listening, not watching, I don't think you'd even know the difference. I was very impressed, so I was. Anyway, you know the drill, don't you? It's not just about us three, it's about you at home as well. What's on your mind tonight? You can get in touch with me all the usual ways. GBviews at gbnews.uk is the email. Or you can tweet me at GBnews if that's your kind of thing. So much response, by the way, to the topic from yesterday about the Dangerous Dog Act. Do you remember that one? Whether or not you should have a licence, whether dogs need to be kept on leads and all the rest of it. I was inundated with your lovely dog stories and your lovely dog pictures. And I just have to show you this one tonight because I thought it was so cute. Let me see if I can get it on the screen. Look at that fine specimen. This is Cooper, the dog. This is Chris's dog. Chris says that dogs are therapeutic, and during COVID he helped my elderly parents through the lockdowns, and when my dad passed away a year ago, he stepped up and helped me and my mum through. He says they are angels. Well, I looked at that little dog and I just wanted to give it a big squeeze. I can't squeeze dogs through television, so I thought I'd just show you him instead. So cute.
My brother has a dog who looks just like that, also called Cooper.
Oh, really?
So that's clearly the right name for that kind of dog. It's such a gorgeous thing.
What kind of dog is it? Because I'm conscious that some people are listening, not watching, and they're thinking, what is it?
It's just a big, fluffy, kind of vanilla-coloured dog, isn't it?
Well, that was insightful.
I mean, that's as good as my dog. I'm a cat woman, I'm afraid, quite obviously.
Well, I know nothing about dogs, so I can't describe to you, viewers, what I'm showing, listeners, what I'm showing on the screen. To me, it just looks like a teddy bear on legs.
You know, I think it could be a Cavapoo. I've got a Cavapoo.
It's definitely
Sean,
got the poodle in it, hasn't it, with the curly hair?
Yeah, I don't know. I just thought it was super cute. And I just thought I'd share it with you, actually, because there's so much doom and gloom these days. And I thought, isn't that nice? And so many of you shared your dog pictures as well. So thank you for doing that. By the way, there was a new cabinet today announced. We've had more cabinets than MFI, haven't we, recently? Yeah, I didn't think it was that kind of interesting, really, to warrant much debate. Have you got anything spectacular you want to add about the cabinet, Toby?
The only remotely original take I have, Michelle, is that I was slightly surprised that the Department for Energy Security has had and net zero tacked on the end, because aren't those two things complete contradictions in terms? How can you make Britain energy secure and achieve our net zero target? It seems
apparently
ludicrous.
It's going to help all of us, all these new departments and these new faces. Anything spectacular you want to share with the nation about the new cabinet, Emma?
Well, other than I disagree with Toby, there, we found it already. Net zero is essential to energy security. Creating our own energy at home is how we have that. But no, I mean, this was a dull reshuffle. It just felt like a low-energy reshuffle from a low-energy government.
I thought something that was interesting, everyone at home, give me your thoughts as well. Lee Anderson, he is going to be the deputy chair. What do you make of that? I thought it was quite interesting, perhaps, to try and reappeal, reconnect with the so-called Red Wall. Many of you write to me and say you want him as your Prime Minister. But he's not your Prime Minister, he's your Deputy Chair instead. Anyway, I've got to say, I didn't actually find that riveting, hence it's not a discussion point tonight. But give me your thoughts. Is that the Cabinet that will lead the Tories to victory at the next election, or is it just a little bit irrelevant? Cooper, the little dog, by the way, is a cockapoo. 1 point to Toby. There you go. You see, my panel, they know their onions, don't they? Right, let's talk about a topic that I found quite interesting and concerning in equal measure. It's the demonisation of young men. There's this character, you might be aware of him, Andrew Tate. He's apparently the king of toxic masculinity. There's been lots of conversation about the kind of role of young men, lots of conversation about consent. There's been teaching courses, how to tackle toxic masculinity. And it really worries me, Toby, whether or not all of these young guys, because you've seen a rise in mental health issues, you've got a high rate of suicides among young men. Are they being demonised unfairly in your mind?
I think they are, yes. You know, I've got 3 sons and, you know, I quite often hear about courses they've had to do at their school. I mean, they haven't actually had to do a course called Toxic Masculinity or How to Tackle Toxic Masculinity, though I believe some teenage boys are having to do courses like that. But nevertheless, you get the impression that the people teaching these courses don't have a very high estimation of what it is to be a man. They think it's essentially a malignant condition, a bit like having cancer, and they're teaching young boys how to overcome the disadvantages of being born essentially evil. They're considered kind of sinners who have to be absolved of their sin and taught how to behave better. I mean, it's little wonder that they're turning to people like Andrew Tate when the only, you know, official sources are telling them that being a man is something you should be ashamed of.
Is it, Emma, being a man, something to be ashamed of?
No, absolutely not. Look, I'm a feminist and I make no bones about the fact that I centre my campaigning on women and women's rights. But I'm also a straight woman, so it is absolutely in my interest for men to be happy and emotionally intelligent and well-adjusted. I'm also an aunt. I have a wonderful nephew, and he's a proper lad. He likes his football. He's 18, so he goes out and gets drunk with his mates. But he's also emotionally intelligent, and that's the balance. And I think we really, really have to separate the toxicity from the masculinity, because if we just denigrate masculinity as a whole, that's a real problem, because there's wonderful things about masculinity. I'm looking across the studio. I see you've got a book by Grayson Perry there. I think he's fascinating on the broad band, the broad width that can be within masculinity, and so much of it, you know, I'm attracted to, I'm interested in. You know, most of my close friends actually are men. And I think that there's a real danger that we just pigeonhole toxic with masculinity, which is a very narrow way of addressing what being a man is, from that much broader, much more interesting range, and really celebrating all that boys can and should be.
Do you think there's a challenge, Toby? Because previously, you had quite specific gender roles. So the woman would be stay at home, you raise the kids, you do the cooking, cleaning, whatever. The man was the breadwinner, the provider, the strong guy, and he protected his family. What you've had now is a massive erosion of that to try and create some form of equality. Do you think that's a good thing or not?
Well, I think it can be a good thing, but I think it depends on how it's presented, how it's taught, whether people feel under pressure to be something they're not. I mean, one of the confusing things, I think, if you are a young boy, is that when what were traditionally masculine qualities, being driven, being a go-getter, being competitive, trying to achieve something, leave a legacy behind. If women now exhibit those qualities, they're thought to be virtues. Isn't that fantastic? You're escaping your stereotype, you're overcoming thousands of years of patriarchal oppression. But if boys try and do those things, if they try and succeed, if they try and win, if they try and achieve something really memorable, if they want to be famous and celebrated, that's somehow an example of toxic masculinity. They're now expected to behave like women were forced to behave for thousands of years.
Is that fair, what Toby's saying, Emma?
I don't think it's fair. I think there is an element of that in some of the extremes on the debate, but I don't think we should take the extremes on the debate as where we should be or where we really, really are. So I think there's plenty of celebration of male success, but there can be ways of celebrating male success that aren't simply about pouring into this, as I say, very narrow view of what male success looks like. So cheerleading for men who want to stay at home with their children, as well as cheerleading men who run great and well-run professional workplaces, as well as cheerleading the England football team, for example. All of these things are examples of men doing what they want to do really well. And those things, I think, absolutely should be championed. It's when we narrow it into that vision that Andrew Tate of I'm only successful because I've got 12 idiot cars and I can hang out with women I've essentially paid for and may well not be treating well. We'll see how that court case comes out.
But you made
That's not good masculinity, and it doesn't have to be the definition. It really shouldn't be the definition of good masculinity.
But you made it quite narrow, though. A second ago, you said something along the lines of, my nephew, he's a proper boy, he's into football.
I said he's a lad. I think there's a difference between, he's your classic lad. And there's nothing wrong with that. I love my nephew. He's a great, great lad. But, to be fair, my niece is a very, very girly girl, but she also loves football. So, and that's the thing, we're blurring the lines about what you can like and what you can do. Great. But let's not do that in a way that denigrates masculinity or femininity.
I think you're a bit more moderate and sensible than many of the people teaching courses about toxic masculinity in schools to teenage boys. I mean, Celia Walden, in her piece about this in The Telegraph, she says that her friend's 13-year-old son, after the horrific murder of Sarah Everard, was taken into an assembly with every boy in the school and essentially told that they needed to respect women, as though any of them could at any moment become Wayne Couzens. And there is this kind of this sort of moral panic that we're somehow in the midst of an epidemic of violence against women and girls, and unless we retrain men, they could all turn into Wayne Couzens. It's like it's generalising from a few bad apples. You wouldn't tolerate that for a second if it was done about, black people or brown people. Similarly, for it to be done about men is really offensive as a man.
I mean, I think there's a difference between saying and having a sense that boys should respect women. That should be standalone. It should be a special assembly. It should be a general sense that we all have. Women should respect men. Men should respect women. Human beings should respect each other. I do think when you say an epidemic, we are talking about a culture at the moment where 2 women are killed by partners a week. So that feels quite epidemic to me. So I think we do need to understand that there is a culture that needs addressing, where men who are feeling inadequate in some way are taking that out in violent ways upon the women in their lives. Not all men, we absolutely know that, and I've said this many, many times. And it's about finding the balance between celebrating masculinity, expanding the boundaries of what masculinity can and should mean, and recognising equality between the sexes, but also celebrating the difference between the sexes.
Tell me very quickly, what is masculinity, Toby?
I think it's being self-reliant. It's being your own person. It's standing up for yourself. I think it's also caring for and protecting those you love. I think it's being responsible. I think it's not wasting your life, not allowing yourself to be too easily distracted by easy pleasures, but to do something which takes self-discipline and that's really worthwhile and that takes a bit of commitment and hard work.
See, I find that fascinating, the latter bit that you just said, because I would just describe that as being driven, not masculine or feminine, but just being driven and focused to achieve. And then you would define that as masculine, but on the flip side, I'm being a massive hypocrite because I will often say to my friends, etc., sometimes I feel like a bit more of a boy in some respects. Don't worry, I'm not about to start declaring that I'm called Dave and ask you to call me he and him and all the rest of it. But sometimes I do think I've got quite a lot of traits that are more character-wise associated with men. I'm quite There's a word I want to use that I can't use at tea time, but I'm trying to think of an opposite word to what I want to say.
You're full of testosterone.
Yeah, I think I've got a bit of testosterone. I think I'm very driven and all the rest of it. And I do think that is often associated with masculinity. Let me throw that open to you at home. What is masculinity? Before we even start going on about what's toxic masculinity, I'll start with that question to you. You can have a think about it and let me know your thoughts. What is masculinity? Hamble has been in touch saying, I really hate, and he's put it in capital letters, so it means business. He hates the term toxic masculinity. It's meaningless, but it stigmatises all males and they simply can't escape being tied with a toxic brush. Max says, boys will never get over this sort of thing because the liberal women are the ones that have made life toxic for all males. Never mind, just boys. Philip says, it's getting so bad, I'm afraid to now look at a woman. I don't open doors for women anymore, and I would never give my seat to one on a bus. If they think we're toxic, they can get on with it. I think you raise a very interesting point there, this whole kind of opening doors and giving seats and stuff like that. It must be very confusing because a lot of women like chivalry. I certainly do. I know lots of others that do too, but it's very confusing, isn't it? What should you do? What shouldn't you do? And all the rest of it. Give me your thoughts on that throughout the break. When I come back from the break, I want to ask you this. I saw a teacher the other day, right? And she was holding up a sign that was basically saying the only good Tory is a dead Tory. The only good Lib Dem is a dead Lib Dem. I think that's pretty disgraceful, quite frankly. She was quite proud of it. And it got me wondering, this is my question for you throughout the break, do you think public servants should have to have almost like an oath of impartiality when A, performing their jobs, and B, representing their trade, their business, their job when out in public? You tell me. I'll see you in 2.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison? I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Michelle Dewbs and I'm keeping you company until 7 o'clock tonight. Alongside me, Toby Young, the Director of the Free Speech Union, and the political consultant, Emma Burnell. Welcome back, everybody. I've been asking you guys about masculinity and toxic masculinity. Trevor has been in touch, saying masculinity is strength, courage, independence, leadership and assertiveness. But couldn't you apply those traits to females as well? Or if you apply them to a female, isn't that a female just perhaps displaying a masculine trait? You tell me your thoughts on that. Anthony, you did make me chuckle in the break, young man. You said, I have had my backside pinched on several occasions, and women have deliberately rubbed themselves up against me. Sure, that's not in your mind, Anthony. You're saying that drunk women are as bad as anyone. Oh, goodness me, I don't feel I can comment on that with any authority. Anyway, let's talk about this story that certainly caught my eye and got a few of us talking. When it comes to being a teacher, what do you think to this? As a teacher that's held up a placard on her own Instagram page, I hasten to add, I'm going to try and show you it on the screen if I can. It basically said, the only good Tory, there you go, I mean, if you can read that, well done, because it looks like it's been scrawled by a kid, but that's probably because it has been. It's one of her students, apparently, that says, the only good Tory is a dead Tory, and the only good Lib Dem is a dead Lib Dem. This teacher put it up on her Instagram and said, student of the week goes to the ledge who made me and fellow teacher this placard. This same teacher has made very disparaging comments about the Tories in the past. And it just got me thinking, right, if you take a job in the public sector, whether you're a teacher or a nurse or whatever, quite frankly, do you think that you should have to be politically impartial when A, doing your job, or B, representing your job in public? Because I do. What do you think?
I think you have to separate those two things. What is representing your job in public is a big and complex question.
No, it's not. It's
at a school.
No, hang on. It's simple. If you're a teacher and you're going to go and stand on a picket line, i.e. you're representing your trade, and you're going to hold placards like that, that's what I mean.
OK, fine. So, I mean, if she's... As a teacher, she has every right to a political life outside of the school. Inside of the school, her job is to teach all of the pupils, whatever their politics. If you are teaching literature, sociology, politics itself, economics, there are competing theories that they should be taught in the most neutral terms so that kids can then look at them and make up their own minds. Kids will come in with all sorts of influences, parents who vote different ways, and in the same way that anyone who walks through the doors of a hospital, no matter what they vote, don't vote at all, never voted in their life, everyone should get the same treatment. I really don't like this kind of sloganeering, not least because as someone who is very left-wing, very socialist, I think it's deeply, deeply unhelpful to the left-wing cause. I do not believe that we should be wishing death on our political opponents. I think we should want to beat them at the ballot box, and that's as far as we should want to go.
Karen says it's shocking. This is why idiots attack and kill MPs. Ed in Liverpool, I think you make a very good point. You say, can you imagine if anyone held up a sign like that saying, for example, the only good, I don't know, pick whatever you want to insert here. The only good Muslim is a dead one. The only good Christian is a dead one. The only good anything is a dead one. If you wrote a sign like that at all, I suspect, rightly so, by the way, you'd probably be arrested. But yet, when it comes to political difference, it seems to be OK. Strange. Toby?
Yeah, well, I think I disagree with you on this, Michelle, because it comes up a lot at the Free Speech Union. Companies, bosses want to apply workplace policies about what you can and can't say in the workplace, what you can and can't say on social media, to people's private lives. So, for instance, at the Free Speech Union, we represented a West Midlands train driver who was sacked for gross misconduct because he said on his personal Facebook account, after Boris declared Freedom Day, July 19th, 2021, thank God the pubs are reopening. I didn't want to live in a Muslim, alcohol-free caliphate for the rest of my life. So that was interpreted by a colleague as Islamophobic. A complaint was made, and he was dismissed for gross misconduct, even though he'd said it out of office hours, outside the workplace, on a private Facebook account. Now, you can say that this is different because the teacher was actually obviously a teacher and representing her profession when she was holding up this sign. But I think it has to be a hard and fast rule. Those rules apply inside the workplace during office hours, but not outside the workplace, because if you say you're representing your profession, or people will know that you work as a teacher at this particular school, that's a slippery slope. That can almost always be dredged up as a reason to police your speech outside the workplace. I think the more worrying thing about this is that she was holding up a placard made by a student. student. And that suggests, and celebrating the fact that that student had made that placard, and that suggests that she's unaware of her responsibility under the 1996 Education Act to teach about politics in a balanced and impartial way. I think a lot of teachers aren't aware of that. They'll happily denounce the Tories or denounce the government in class when they're teaching about, racism or gender or whatever it might be. They'll do it in a very partisan, politically biased way, unaware that they have an obligation not to indoctrinate their children, but to let them make up their own minds about contentious political issues. That, to me, is the worrying thing about this, not the fact that she was holding up the sign.
Yeah, see, but where would you draw the line? Or, in fact, would you draw the line? So my viewer then, Ed, just said, for example, if she was stood there holding up a sign saying the only good Muslim is a dead one, the only good Christian is a dead one, the only good Jew is a dead one, whatever, there would be trouble.
Yeah, I think that there would be trouble then, because that could conceivably be against the law. That could be an incitement to racial hatred, stirring up hatred against someone on the basis of their skin colour. This is slightly different. It's not against the law to stir up hatred against someone because of their political beliefs. It might be in due course, but it isn't at the moment.
But I thought the whole hate crime thing, which I think is odd, it goes too far if you ask me, but notwithstanding that, to stand there and say the only good talk, because what I feel like a little bit, as long as you're saying the only good, for example, Tory is a dead one, as long as you're criticising the Tories, then you can kind of get away with it. That's how I feel the sentiment is in society, and I think that is incredibly wrong.
But beyond religion, ideology isn't a protected characteristic, so it's not covered under the hate crime laws or the Equalities Act.
Religion or belief is, but I'm not sure this would fall under that heading. I think... I don't think anyone should be punished for expressing hatred. I mean, it's not a particularly attractive human emotion, but, it's perfectly acceptable, I think, to hate certain things, even to hate certain people. I don't see why that should be a crime or why we should be so worried about it.
I think if you're a public servant, if you like, so if you work in the public sector and you are representing your role, and you'll say, well, what do you mean representing your role? For example, I don't know, if you're going to a teachers' convention, if you're going to a picket line, if you're going to a teachers' training society, whatever you do, and you're there for one reason and one reason only, which is your occupation, then you shouldn't be making statements that are politically biased, politically motivated, because then it's like you and I disagreed before. I remember this, that nurse that went on telly and she was saying about Tories, should they be resuscitated? And she got fired, I think, for going on television, not for that statement, if I remember rightly. And I think that you were saying, because I was saying she should lose her job for that. And I think, if I remember rightly, you were saying that she shouldn't.
Yes, I think that's right. We did disagree about that. I mean, I think in this instance, if you were to prohibit a teacher, because they're a teacher, from engaging in politically partisan behaviour of this kind, wouldn't that prevent them from striking? I mean, after all, we know that what these strikes are really about are trying to undermine confidence in the government, to try and make sure Labour's elected next time. I mean, the fact is that because she held up this sign, the veil is whisked aside. It's obvious that it's motivated by partisan hatred of the Tories and not because there's a genuine cost of living crisis amongst the teaching profession. So in a way, it's been helpful that she's been allowed to reveal the true motives of the strikers in that way.
All right, then, so I'll concede. Maybe she shouldn't get a criminal record. I'll concede on that. But should she lose a job, though, briefly, yes or no?
No.
Look what I'm dealing with, everybody. Look at what I have to deal with on a daily basis. Let's look at your thoughts, shall we? Hamble again says school teachers need to at least be seen to be politically neutral. Samantha says, my son's teacher told the whole class that people who voted for Brexit think the world is flat. Samantha says, had I expressed any right-wing opinions in school, I would have been frog-marched out of there. Mark says, yes, I found someone that's saying, Mark says, yes, they should be sacked. There's no decision here. They should keep their views to themselves. That's what I think. Richard says, this is just the latest example of all of this. This idiot, his words, not mine, should be made an example of. You never see or hear people of a Tory persuasion holding up placards about Labour. Well, there you go. Keep your thought. Emmett, what?
I don't think they've been on Twitter lately.
Well, there you go. I'm going to take a quick break. When we come back, keep your thoughts coming in. But get this, a Welsh-speaking school has been placed in special measures because too many pupils there are speaking English and not celebrating their Welshness. What do you think to this? How much effort should be put into protecting, nurturing, if you like, Britain's minority languages? Give me your thoughts and I'll see you in 2.
He's the king of breakfast TV, and he's back. Eamon Holmes, back on the TV with me this morning.
Even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh, yes. Already to bless.
Yeah. Oh, Eamon. Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamon Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dewbs and Co.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone.
My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one.
Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Dewbs and Co. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions. I have no time for cultural totalitarianism. We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, keeping you company until 7 o'clock tonight alongside me, Toby Young, the director of the Free Speech Union, and the political consultant, Emma Burnell. Lots of you getting in contact about that last topic, about whether or not as a teacher you should be able to hold placards saying the only good Tory, for example, is a dead one. Steve says, how disgusting is it for teachers to say the only good Tory is a dead one? It just shows the level of left-wing bias in the union and the indoctrination of children. Ian says, when I was a schoolboy in the 70s, a teacher at our school was sacked because the headmaster heard him basically celebrating the virtues of Welsh nationalism to his class. Well, Ian, you lead me nicely, so you do, my friend. On to my next topic, because, get this, a primary school in Wales has been put into special measures for letting children speak too much English. Apparently, inspectors there said pupils were not encouraged to celebrate their Welsh culture and their traditions. I'm going to start with you, Toby, only because you bang the drum for free speech and all the rest of it. So free speech, I suspect then you think that absolutely it's these pupils' entitlement to speak whatever language they so choose.
Yes, I'm not sure, but they're not being punished. The school is being punished for not encouraging them to speak Welsh more. I know how strong feelings are on this topic in Wales because I got into a spot of difficulty about 20 years ago when I was promoting my book, How to Lose Friends and Alienate People. I appeared in Bangor on Radio Wales, and I was a little bit late, and I explained that I got lost because road signs in Wales are in Welsh and English. And I'd seen this sign saying Garsoff Station, imagining that I was in a town called Garsoff, but in fact Garsoff is the Welsh word for station. Anyway, I talked about this and said how absurd it was that all road signs were in Welsh and English in Wales, given how tiny the fraction of the population is that actually speaks Welsh in Wales. Afterwards, at the conclusion of the broadcast, the producer came up to me and said, I got some rather bad news, Mr Young. One of our listeners took rather an exception to your remarks about the Welsh language. He's come down to the studio to have it out with you, like. And I thought, crikey, really better show me out the back way. Oh, no, there is no back way. You're going to have to face the music. And I had to then navigate my way past this kind of Welsh troll with steam coming out of his ears, stamping around, absolutely furious. But I have to say, he taught me a lesson. And the lesson is that, you know, in places like Wales, in Scotland, in Northern Ireland, people care deeply about protecting their regional identity, and that means preserving every aspect of their cultural heritage they can, including their language. So I'm now sympathetic to that guy, and I'm sympathetic to the school who wanted the children to speak Welsh more.
I almost want to take you home with me and get you to do your Welsh utterings because my nana was Welsh, and obviously she passed away now, and just hearing you talk like that, your little Welsh accent, it did give me a little reminiscing of my nana then. Funny how you'll do your Welsh accent, not your Michelle Dewberry accent. What do you make to this?
I mean, I suspect that there's a lot more to any school being put into special measures than one area. Schools being put in special measures is quite an extreme position for a school. They tend to go through various stages before that happens. So I don't think one area of this, the inspection, will put them into special measures. So there's probably a lot more going on in this school. This is the bit that's been highlighted. I think kids learning multiple languages is a brilliant idea. I really regret that I didn't start learning another language until I was 11. I wasn't very good at it by that point. I speak a little Italian, and piccolo, but beyond that, really very little. And it's a regret in my life that I don't have that. And I watch kids I know speaking quite fluently in other languages before they're 10 because they've travelled that bit more, because their parents have really taken the opportunity, because they are doing a bit more language in primary school now. And I just think that's wonderful, because the ways that you can, just the more ways we can communicate with each other, the better. And learning different languages does give you, A, a really great business advantage, and C, just a way of thinking in different ways. As someone who's obsessed with communication, language, as a writer, I think it's so important to find as many ways as possible to express ourselves. And so having kids learn as many languages as possible, whether that be Welsh or Japanese or Esperanto, great, go for it.
Who came off best, by the way, you or the Welsh fella?
The Welsh fella.
I bet he tells that story. I bet he goes around the pubs to this day telling the story about when he gave one to Toby Young. Les has been in touch saying Welsh is an indigenous language, not a minority language, and it should be protected, Carol. If you go to a Welsh school, respect the language and why you're there. Or go to an English-speaking school. Philip says, I'm Welsh, but I'm sick of receiving bilingual official mail, twice the paper, twice the cost, and I suspect it's because even the Welsh speakers read the English. Sandy says, we spend an absolute fortune in Wales on all public documentation being duplicated and printed in Welsh. All public sector telephone messaging is spoken in Welsh first, whilst we're all sitting and waiting for it to be spoken in English. I've got some costs, by the way, about UK translation. So just to be clear, I'm not giving you costs of just Welsh translators or anything like that. But in total, UK, NHS Trust spent about £113 million on interpreters during 2019 to 20. Sorry, the tax year 2019-20 to 21-22. That was an average of £725,000 per NHS Trust. I think the translation is a little bit ridiculous. When you get a letter from your NHS, I'm going off topic a little bit, but it's linked. When you get a letter from the NHS, you get pages of translation. And I actually don't think it's right.
I mean, if I was a non-Welsh speaking resident in Wales who had to wade through reams of stuff that was being paid for by my rates in Welsh before getting to the English part, I can imagine being quite irritated. But there are other, I think it would be quite hypocritical of the Westminster government to preach to the Welsh government about wasting taxpayers' money, because think of the wastage today. Michelle, all those departments being renamed. Think of all the headed paper, the business cards that have to be... I mean, if I had the stationery concession for Whitehall, I'd now be a multi-millionaire, because they change their names every 8 months.
But the thing is, though, I think most people would struggle to name the cabinet anyway, so you could perhaps even just do away with all the business cards. It seems to change that frequently. I was looking into the Cornish language today. Do you know how many fluent speakers of Cornish there are in this country, Emma?
I do not.
Neither did I, but I do now. Do you know how many?
I'm going to guess 10,000.
Do you know how many?
I'm going to go higher, 50,000.
Well, Unless my information is incorrect, then there are apparently only 300 fluent speakers. And apparently lots of people more have some knowledge but are not fluent.
You could set up a great secret society, couldn't you, talking to each other in Cornish? Kernow.
Yes, well, 300 of you apparently could do that. I can give directions in German.
Very good.
And I'm very proud of that. I remember it from my school days, but that is about all. Can you speak any languages?
Can the Germans understand you when you're speaking German with your Hull accent?
Well, often you say about Hull accent, but what I try to do is I try to put on a German accent.
Right.
My dad does that.
I do that whichever foreign country I go to. I basically speak English, but with some peculiar accent, thinking that they might be able to understand me because I'm speaking whatever accent I think that it is that I'm adopting. Anyway, do you guys, are you multilingual, bilingual? What are you at home? I do agree with you that languages, they do open up so much opportunity for people, don't they? How much, though, do you think we should invest in protecting those regional languages that we have? Going to take a quick break. When we come back, I want to talk to you about 15-minute cities. Have you heard of this concept? Do you like it? Or are you worried about it? Or do you not even know what I'm talking about? Whatever it is, see you in 2.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank. My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB+ radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, I'm Michelle Dewbs, keeping you company until 7 o'clock tonight. Alongside me, I've got Toby Young, the director of Free Speech Union, and the political consultant, Emma Burnell. And Toby's just been telling me an interesting story about a new development in technology, apparently, where for some deaf people, apparently you can get some glasses that when someone's talking to you will put subtitles right in front of your very eyes. I've never heard of it. Sounds quite interesting, although quite distracting, I would imagine. Do you use those kind of things? Get in touch, let me know. Anyway, let's talk 15-minute cities. Have you heard of this concept? In essence, it sounds like quite a good idea. In essence, I do caveat. Basically, you'd have all your different things that you need, whether it's your schools, your doctors, whatever. You won't be able to get into any of these things, but don't worry about that. You'd have all of your facilities within 15 minutes of walking, public transport. Not a problem. But, Emma, it becomes problematic when you start looking at actually what they will then do is start restricting movement among these zones, these regions. Many people are concerned about this, saying it's all about control. Where are you on it?
I think 15-minute cities are great. I can't believe the things that we find to build culture war points around now are just hilarious. It's just a way of making sure that people who live in small towns and suburbs and what have you have local amenities that are good. And if you have local amenities that are good, you will travel less. You won't never travel again, you won't never leave your neighbourhood again, but you will need to leave it less often, and that's a good thing. People should have things on their doorsteps that help them live their day-to-day lives. And 15-minute cities is it's a neighbourhood planning phrase that has been taken into this bizarre realm, completely outside of what actually anyone who's working on it is going to be doing with it, which is, as I say, just trying to make suburbs and small towns and commuter towns and places that are are currently considered satellites to big cities, so they don't have the amenities because, hey, you can just go into London or whatever, actually have those on their doorstep. And I think that's a great thing.
You're more trusting than me. Toby Young, what do you make to it?
Yeah, I'm not a fan. I think of it as the latest battlefront in the war on the motorist. So the way these 15-minute cities will work is that if you travel in a motorised vehicle from one 15-minute zone to another, you can only do that a certain number of times per year, and if you exceed that number, then you'll face quite heavy fines. And I don't think that people's movement should be controlled in this way. This feels very draconian. It feels like an interference in people's liberty. Now, the idea, of course, is to reduce carbon emissions, but you can easily imagine, not all the facilities you need being within a 15-minute radius of your house. I mean, councils are going to impose these zones and impose these traffic fines on people who travel too often between them before they put the schools and the chemists and the hospitals in place. And even if there is a school, 15 minutes away, there might be one 2 minutes away, and your kid might want to be driven there if he's very young. But you won't be able to do that more than X number of times a year if they put these restrictions in place. So it feels to me like a recipe for a lot of resentment, a way of trying to control us, which just isn't welcome.
I worry that some of these councillors are getting a little bit too power hungry. I think the COVID situation went to their heads because they realised they probably couldn't believe the luck, Emma, because a lot of people came up with some of these ideas about, we'll try and lock people in their houses pretty much, only allow them out for about half an hour a day or whatever it is. There was probably shock that people went for it. And now I do worry that we've got this situation where you've got these low traffic neighbourhoods popping up absolutely everywhere. It feels like you've got these ULEZ charges. These 15-minute zones, what you're talking about sounds wonderful. All these things on your doorstep, brilliant. But as Toby says, for example, the one that's due to be trialled in Oxford, you're only allowed to leave your zone 100 times in a year.
Twice a week.
You've got to register. Yeah.
Yeah. So, twice a week in your car. I get because I live in what is essentially a 15-minute neighbourhood, because I live in a part of London that's really well, got great amenities. I get my car maybe once a week, if that.
Good for you. And do you know what the key concept of that is? Choice.
But the joy of my choice is that I've also got great public transport. Now, I agree with you that you have to do this the right way round. You have to put the amenities and the transport systems in first before you say, actually, the modal shift has to happen first. I live in Waltham Forest. We had a low-traffic neighbourhood about 10 years before anyone else. It was called Mini Holland. For about 5 years, Mini Holland was a swear word locally, and then we all got used to it, and we all actually really like it now. And things have changed and things are better. So I think it's just a case of getting things done in the right way, in the right order.
I think Michelle makes a good point. I think one of the reasons they are becoming such a focal point of opposition in Oxford, Canterbury, elsewhere, is that there hasn't been any democratic consent asked for or given. These councillors are just deciding to do it. They think it's the right thing to do. They want to reduce carbon emissions. They haven't stood on a platform, a manifesto of introducing this. They've consulted about it, and in many cases, the response to the consultation has been overwhelmingly negative, and yet they're doing it anyway. There's a sense of, they're doing what they think people should suck up because it's good for them, not because they've consented to it, and that's not democratic.
Oxford Council have been quite upset at some of the criticism that they've received about this. They're saying that these things are wrongly described as climate lockdowns. They're saying that there have been consultations on things like traffic filters, and they are at pains to stress that this is a trial that they will be consulting on the outcome of.
Yeah, I think it is important to make clear that it isn't, the equivalent of a lockdown. People won't be imprisoned in these 15-minute zones. They'll be able to walk to other 15-minute zones. They'll be able to travel by bicycle, presumably by electric car too. It's only if they want to travel more than X number of times per year in a diesel or petrol-driven vehicle that they'll have to pay a fine. So I think that's important, and no one wants to encourage people overreacting because they've misunderstood exactly what the plan is. But yeah, Oxford call it a trial, but according to this piece in Echo News, 100 councils across the country have signed up for these to become 15-minute cities. So I don't think anyone realistically expects it not to go ahead. It's not really a trial. This is happening.
Well, do you know what I think is interesting? What about electric cars in all this? Because if everyone's so desperate to protect the economy, the environment, and there's all these pushes to electric cars, how come those things are going to be restricted as well? Surely they would get a free pass. Many of you getting in touch there and saying this is about control, about taxing. It's another tax, says Leon, but with a sinister element thrown in. Got to say, I think power's gone to their head and I don't like it. Emma, Turby, thank you for your company. Guys at home, thank you. Have a wonderful night and I'll see you tomorrow.
Good evening. It'll be getting windy through Wednesday across the northern half of the UK at least. We have a Met Office warning in the far northwest. Further south, light winds tonight means fog and frost. They'll steadily clear to reveal plenty of sunshine by the afternoon under the influence of high pressure. But further north, an approaching weather front squeezing the isobars together. So the winds picking up through the night across the far northwest and getting stronger by Wednesday morning. Further south, though, the winds are light, the frost is returning and the fog is thickening up as well. Quite gloopy conditions in places by Wednesday morning. That fog will be around through the morning rush hour as well. And we start the day well below freezing, -2, -3. That's towns and cities, rural spots. -6, possibly +5 or 6 in urban areas further north because there's more cloud and because of those winds. Now, as I said, that fog is going to stick around through tomorrow morning's rush hour, so bear that in mind. Could be pretty dense, clearing by late morning. The winds strengthening through the day in the far northwest. We have a Met Office yellow warning in place. Those winds likely to cause some disruption, certainly to ferry services, but also affect the bridges. And then a narrow but intense band of rain comes in here later on. Elsewhere, most places dry, lots of sunshine in the south, quite cloudy across southern Scotland and Northern Ireland, and quite windy here as well. But the strongest winds are in the far north.